All right. Hello again, Hub subscribers. We are back with another one of our awesome author interviews. If you can't tell from what's next to me, we are on with the one and only Candace Fleming. Candace, how you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for asking. How are you today, Justin?
I'm feeling pretty fantastic.
Great.
Um, so since we are doing this for the Hub and we are a librarian focused blog, first thing we always like to ask about is what is your personal history with libraries, both as a professional and just as a human being who loves libraries?
Oh man, can I tell you my favorite library story? When I was a kid, I had a librarian in Charleston, Illinois, actually, and she knew I was a big reader, so she was always I would bicycle over third, fourth, fifth grade, and she knew I was a big reader, so she would recommend things. And one day, I go to Miss Snyder, was her name. I go up and I bring this book whose cover I adore, right? And it's got this beautiful picture, I'm not kidding, of these three women in a convertible, looking beautiful with their scarves flying out behind them in the wind, right? Hair flying. I mean, carefree, beautiful women. I'm like, I want to read this book. And obviously, it was not an appropriate book for a fourth grader. Mhm. But she didn't get too crazy about it. Instead, she recommended something else. And that, I learned to love the librarian from that. I still dream about that book. Later on, I saw her when I was older, and she said it was Jacqueline Suzanne, and there was just no way a 10-year-old was going to read. But she gave me what we walked back to the kids section and we found something completely appropriate. I wish I could remember what the book was, but I remembered loving it. So, and I wasn't the only kid she did that for, right? So, as I grew, librarians were those people that I could always trust, whose opinions always mattered and still continue to trust and always matter to me. So,
That's fantastic. I think getting into the adult literature far too soon has been a pretty common theme in these interviews.
is
Sounds
it?
like
Did
you're
they?
one of our few that was thwarted from doing that.
Were we all saved by librarians? I think as 10 and I was the 70s. So, my guess is that I had no idea if I'd have read anything, what was going on. But yeah, yeah, she was astonishing.
So you're one of the most prolific authors that we've had on this series so far. Your pages on teaching books you scroll a very, very long time to go through all of your works. You're not exclusively a nonfiction author, but that's probably what our viewers know you best for. What's the draw for nonfiction for you?
Well, I do have a master's degree in American history, so there is that draw to use it, right? But I'm, I can't say I'm really compelled, right? Because I started with picture books and they were all fiction. Um, Here's how I feel about true about nonfiction right now is that I think truth is more important than anything. And I also believe, especially like people say, well, why are you writing for young adults? Why write for teenagers? Because all the facts are literally to hand, right? I pick up my phone, I can find anything I want. Here's my issue with that. We have a lot of facts to hand, but absolutely no context at all. And so that it feels to me like this is my job. I'm going to be your reliable guide, teenagers, through certain stories that I think might connect to you. I'm not writing history so that kids can use it for a report. I'm not writing history so because I think they need to learn about a particular topic. The topics I choose all have something that I want to say to teenagers of the 21st century, that illuminate how we live today. So that's how I feel about truth and nonfiction and history. It's not in a vacuum. And there are reasons that we are in places today because of things that happened in the past. So.
And I think that's one of the most common misconceptions about the nonfiction section in 2025. It's not like when we were in school and you're using it for reports. We have databases for that now. It's pleasure reading, just like any other section of the
It
library.
is. And yeah, it is. And I'm working really hard. I think about it all the time. It's something I've thought about for a long time too. Obviously, it's probably why I'm doing more and more nonfiction, is I want it to be read as pleasure. I want to write a story that's 100% true, but that can be read by teenagers with that same way that they read a novel. So they're going to fill in the blanks. They can see the settings and the characters in their heads that just happen to be true people that are people that once lived and true places. So
Um, so you mentioned, the motivations behind writing for teens. Um, in addition to that, you write across a really broad spectrum of age ranges. I think every single librarian in my district, from pre-K all the way up through our high schools, has you in their collections. How do you mentally readjust between doing some of your elementary project, maybe your, more upper elementary, and then all the way up through your young adult stuff? How do you, what's that mental process like?
I actually need the difference. I know a lot of people I've heard, even at one time, my editor was sort of like, why do we keep flipping around? Why do we have a different genre now? Why are we writing preschool? Right. Um, and not that she didn't want me to, but it's one of those things you always hear writers are supposed to stay sort of in their lane. They're going to do that same thing over and over again. But for me, I can't. I really need the challenge. I need the variety, if you will. And for me, what works really, really well is when I'm in the middle of a big nonfiction project, say like Death in the Jungle or the Romanovs. Um, when I'm in the middle of something like that, and it's a more intense story, I really need, seriously, I just really need a little preschool in my life or a little third grade in my life, right? I just need something a little more whimsical, a little more fun. And so it's sort of like right brain, left brain. So I might be in the middle of a big nonfiction and I'll stop for a little while and say, I need to take a rest. And I think I'm just going to go and seriously, I say this a lot. I'm going to go and play with some language. I'm going to play around on a piece of paper, see what I come up with. Usually it's preschool if I'm just playing with language, what I come up with, right? And that I think really sharpens both types of writing. I just I can't imagine doing one thing, only one thing. Um, I need the mental break, I think. So.
Well,
And
and oh, sorry,
I
go ahead.
know, go ahead. No, I know it's like, I remember when I won the Boston Globe Horn Book Award for, it was just announced, and I was at some event in New York City and for the Romanovs. And somebody said to me in this interview, what's your next? Coming next? And I actually had to say, Bulldozer's Big Day, because because that's what was coming next. And it was solidly for 3-year-olds. So not the same type of book at all. So
And I can imagine with the sort of intensity of the young adult topics that you pick, you definitely need those mental breaks.
I need those breaks.
I'm gonna stop writing about murder and talk about honeybees for a little while.
Yes, thank goodness. Yes, bring me a giant squid, right? Yeah, yeah.
How do you go about choosing your topics for your longer YA works? Do you have, a list of planned ideas, or does something just grab you and you're like, I'm obsessed with this for the next couple of years?
I gotta admit, I have sort of the selfish author eye. So all the topics that I actually have written about are all topics that I've been obsessed about for a very long time in some way, right? I certainly didn't know as much about them that I thought I did. I always discover that I never know anything. I think I do, but I know nothing. But they are things that I want to explore. But I also always, always think about topics that appeal. It's my number one when I think about how do I approach writing nonfiction for teenagers. The first thing I ask myself is what topics will appeal to teenagers? What topic might they actually come to the library, pick that, because I'm looking at your shelf, pick that book off the shelf because it looks like it would be a good read, because it's something that they're interested in. And so that's, you know, the two things kind of come together. Things that I think they would find appealing, things that I also find appealing. And that's how I come to a topic. So people are always saying to me, I have a topic for you. You should write a book about. And I thought, yeah, that is really great. But I've never had anybody suggest a book that I ended up writing, right? It always has to start with me and what I think I want to say to teenagers. So.
Does that also inform your storytelling approach with these topics? For instance, I know with Romanoffs, it has a lot of similarities to the true crime that's really popular with young adults right now. Does that approach of what's going to sell and what's going to draw interest, does that inform your writing process as well?
Absolutely. I know that. I know that teenagers have a need for speed. And so I am going to move as fast as I can. I'm going to use foreshadowing. I'm going to use some cliffhangers. I'm going to use scenes, details, sensory detail, if I can find them in the historical record. I'm going to use dialogue, except those will actually be quotes, right? I'm going to use all of those same tools that fiction writers use to hook those readers in. And so, yeah, certainly that's what I'm doing.
And so you mentioned it earlier, and on the topic of choosing your topics,
Uh,
your newest, Death in the Jungle, already getting a lot of recognition. I believe you had just got another Horn Book Award
I
for this
it
one.
did. It won my third Boston Globe Horn Book Award for nonfiction. I am over the moon. I can't tell you how excited I was about that. I was so worried about this book. You know,
What worried you about this one?
Well, a couple of things. One, when I would talk to people about what I was working on next, they'd be like, "You're writing that book for teenagers?" Like it was too ugly a story, right? As if somehow history is always supposed to be something we learn from, noble and good. But we all know that the greater places of learning, where we learn more about ourselves and our community and our world and our past, is usually in the darker stories, right? Those tell us more about ourselves than the the history where we put people on a pedestal never informs us of anything, in my opinion. But um, so I had a lot of people that were like, you know, maybe you shouldn't tell this story, or a lot of people saying you should not tell this story to teenagers. And I worried about that. And I worried about people saying I couldn't tell it. I didn't worry about the fact that I didn't believe I could tell it for teenagers because I was really committed to the fact that I could. I was also worried because so many people who were former members of People's Temple actually um, told me their stories. They had to be convinced to tell me their stories. And the stories that they told me were both beautiful and horrible and raw and honest. And I felt like they had given me this gift. And really the gift they were giving it to teenagers because every single one of them had been a teen in People's Temple and a teenager eventually in Jonestown. And every single one of them said to me that the reason they had chosen to tell me their story was because they had something they wanted to say to teenagers. And I just felt really concerned, right, that I hadn't done their stories, their lives, really. I hadn't done them justice. And so I was so relieved when every reviewer, you know, it's gotten what, 8-starred reviews now. Every reviewer got the humanity of the story, got what it was that I was trying to actually say with this book. And then it won that award. And so I just felt so much more relieved because was so desperately worried. I thought, I can't fail them. You know, I can't fail them. And I've never had that sort of pressure before. Most of the people I've written about are dead. Um, and yeah, I had this real feeling of pressure.
And you touch on this in it's either the epilogue or the author's note at the end of the book. What made Jonestown feel especially pertinent to teenagers in 2025 for you?
Oh, I think the whole story of Jonestown is especially connective to teenagers because the whole story really is about social dynamics and identity and peer pressure, influence, tribalism, you name it, right? Individual agency. These are all issues that teenagers are dealing with every single day. They're important in their lives. And so it's a cautionary tale, I think, about influence, um, tribalism. Um, but it's also, I think, a story that they will recognize themselves in. And I know that sounds odd because we're talking about People's Temple, a cult, and Jonestown, where 919 people were massacred. But they will recognize themselves in those teenagers that go to Jonestown. For example, Annie Moore. I'm thinking about Annie Moore. I think a lot of kids will actually recognize her idealism, her need to change the world, to, put it out there. They'll certainly recognize the rebelliousness of Tommy Bogue. And Stephen Jones. I mean, I think Stephen Jones, I recognized my teen self in Stephen Jones because he had this really difficult relationship with his father, Jim Jones. He loved his father and he hated his father. And what teenager hasn't felt exactly that about their parents? And so I think there's a lot here that connects to um, the modern 21st century reader, the modern teenager. There's a lot here that connects them to their lives, but there's also a lot to be seen and learned through or discovered through the actual story. Yeah.
Another thing that really stands out reading this book is how much you head on tackle a lot of the popular conceptions about Jonestown and what happened at Jonestown. Even just now, you mentioned the 900 plus people being massacred rather than the way that people would normally talk about this. Um, is that something that you approached the project with in mind, or is that something that presented itself as you got to know these subjects better?
No, I'm going to say I thought I knew about Jonestown. I was actually alive when, I'd love to say I was two when it happened, but no, I was actually alive. I remember, I was in middle school. I remember watching it. It was so, and matter of fact, I've gone back and looked at the original coverage in '78, and it was so sensationalized and so, the members were so demonized. All the um, members, people who died and people who survived and people who were still members and still in the United States. I mean, it's completely unsympathetic on the part of the media and on the American public, on the US government. But I did not come to the humanity of it all, I guess, until I really did get to know those individuals. And I really did, not only the ones that I interviewed, but ones that are gone, like Hyacinth and Zippy, her sister, Hi and Zip. They're both gone, but they left behind interviews, a book, that sorts of things. Um, and as I called through all these records, I would get to know these people. Some of those people appear again and again and again, particularly if they were in leadership positions. And I started to discover who they were, right? And here's this weird moment I had. I'm going to tell you this, but this very weird moment. I was doing photo research towards the end of my towards the end of the project, and I'm looking for photos, and I don't know if you know that the reason we have so many photographs and so many documents of People's Temple is because after the massacre, they gathered up, the FBI swooped in and they gathered up all the documents pertaining to People's Temple. And People's Temple kept a lot of documents themselves, everything, right? So we have mountains and mountains of documentation. So I'm looking at photographs. The problem with the documentation was the photographs, the FBI didn't know who those people were. And so they would say, a classroom in Jonestown. And that was the one that I remember clearly. So I'm looking at these photographs and I'm looking digitally online and I'm looking at this and the caption is a school classroom in Jonestown. And my first thought is cool. I'll include that and my readers can see what a classroom in Jonestown looked like. And then I looked closer and all of a sudden I realized that I recognized the people in it, right? And not only that, but I knew their personalities. So little Martin Amis is turned towards the camera, and I'm like, oh, he's always been little mischievous little devil. No wonder they've come to take, pictures, probably propaganda pictures, but he's turning around to see what's going on. And Shonda James is the teacher, who I knew her, sprightly, wonderful teenager who unfortunately attracted Jim Jones. And then there was Kwame Jones, who was sitting on the other side. And I actually thought to myself, oh, he was always so fun loving. He looked so pensive. I wonder what's up with him in this picture. And all of a sudden, I like kind of burst into tears because I thought to myself, I feel like I'm looking at my own family album. It was the weirdest thing. It was like all of a sudden, if you just at the beginning of the project, I would have known any of those people. But all of a sudden, it was like I was looking at my own family album that I'd gotten to know them that intimately that I was not only able to identify them, but actually look at them and think, oh, what's up with him that day? Or, you know,
Well, and
yeah, it's strange.
as you mentioned, you usually do when you're doing history, it's usually people that have been dead for a long time. But with this one, it became an extremely personal project. I remember you sharing at ALA over the summer just how deeply you got to be connected to these survivors that told you these stories. Um, how did you maintain that personal emotional distance so you didn't feel yourself getting too
It
invested in this
You know
story?
what? It was really hard. It was really hard. And what I finally decided, and we were talking about why I call it the massacre, or the massacre, and we keep talking about, I keep saying, the humanity of it. Finally, what I decided was that this is really a story. I mean, I can't tell the story without Jim Jones at all, but this is really a story about them. And so I'm going to show them as individuals, um, as people with agency. They were not brainwashed. They were not mentally ill. They did not have some missing something in their lives. They actually came for real reasons because they believed in social economic equality, or they were trying to survive in devastated neighborhoods of, poverty-ridden um, San Francisco, Los Angeles, segregated Indianapolis back in the 50s. I mean, this is a group that was 20 years in the making, right? And so I finally decided that I just had to go with that humanity, that idea that these were people, that they were hurt by things that happened in the temple. They were um, deeply in love with their community. They really were a family. And because they were so tightly knit as a family, they were willing to put up with all kinds of abuse. If you think about abusive families, right? People stay because they love somebody, and they can't leave the other members of their family. This is how I began to feel about People's Temple. Um, and so, did I keep my distance? To an extent, but I can't say that I tried really hard to keep too distant. I tried to be more rhetorical. Do you know what I mean? I tried to instead of injecting how I felt about it, I tried to stick with how they said they felt about it.
Absolutely. Um, you mentioned needing to tell a lot of Jim's story in order to make Jonestown be fully understood. And the first half or so of the book is sort of a not necessarily a biography of him, but you do dig a lot into him. And one thing that struck me is just understanding the nobility of this man, at least in some ways at the start. What was it like trying to find that balance between acknowledging that yes, this man was a monster ultimately, but also he did some really significant things in terms of the civil rights movement, in terms of equality for his temple members.
Yeah, isn't that something? Um, it's just I can't quite get over it. Um, I really tried. At first, I thought I would try to write the story with as little of Jim Jones as I possibly could. And it was Stephen Jones, in one of our first interview, who said, you can't understand People's Temple unless you understand my father. And I took him at his word. And so I went back, and what I did, yeah, really, it's sort of a biography of Jones, except that what I was looking for were those events in his life that shaped him to become this man that eventually helps orchestrate the death of 919 people, right? Um, and it was really difficult because even Stephen said to me, he was so, at first, he was such a good person, which is what drew people in. And true, I think he did play the white savior. He did certainly play his white privilege to grow a church predominantly of African Americans. But he also really did walk the walk. He wasn't full of baloney when he was doing that. He really believed in segregation. He really believed in social, economic, racial equality. He really did. He really was a socialist who believed that we could take care of everybody. We could all live together. We could all love each other. We could actually take care of each other, and no one would be sick or die or be forgotten. He really did. He really was committed to that. Um, and then the dream becomes more and more warped, obviously, for various reasons, mostly drugs. Um, but even then, by 73, right, he's becoming more and more drug addled. But even then, I would hear stories from everybody that I spoke to and accounts that I read where he would like he would have a service, a regular church service on Sunday, and he would light up the room. I think that's Stephen's quote. He would light up the room and he would hug children and hug little old ladies and kiss them and hold them close. And who is that man? Right? I mean, I'm still grappling with it. I can't quite understand the change. And neither, in many ways, can people like Stephen Jones himself. It's something that he's wrestled with forever, who quite understands what happened there. But that's the hardest part. I think that's still the biggest question mark for me in the whole story.
I think hearing you talk about that, it reminds me of when we talked to Mindy McGinnis about heroin, and she was saying that a lot of community groups didn't like how appealing she made opiates seem at the beginning. And she had to make the case that, well, there has to be a reason this character gets addicted to
Right.
this.
That's right. Absolutely. You have to show why. And here's why, right? So th imagine yourself. You're a single mother. You've got kids. You live in this devastated neighborhood, economically devastated in Los Angeles. You want your kids to go to a good school. You want them to be safe. You want them to hang out with people that are going to be good people, right? Just what every parent wants. How can she do that alone? Working two jobs. And so here comes People's Temple, moves into the neighborhood, has an outreach, provides food, provides a great education, provides, I mean, even sending members to college after graduation, um, providing medical care, care for old people, providing after school activities, youth groups, and treating you like you belong there. You're not a charity case. You're us. You're our family. You're part of this, the human family. You're us. I would find it appealing, you know?
Absolutely.
And then they get there and they meet the other members and they become close and they marry each other or they date each other or they share each other's children. And what happens? Now they've got this family that they adore and um, um, a common cause.
And
Right.
by the time everything starts unraveling, you're kind of pot committed to everything. And
Yeah. Yeah. Harder and harder to go.
um, so with the nonfiction topics that you choose to write about, you don't shy away from, the murder, the death, the salacious stuff. And you present it in a really honest way, including, talking about Charles Lindbergh and his downfall after fame. Have you received any types of challenges, bans, community pushback from the topics that you write and how you choose to write about them?
Yeah, I can't remember. There's several places, Florida, California, Oklahoma. There's some other ones. For that I think is interesting. Charles Lindbergh, the rise and fall of Charles Lindbergh. That's like high on the list because what I understand is people seem to think, oh, there it is. People seem to think that that rally that I it opens with a Charles Lindbergh America First rally. And it sounds a lot like rallies we have seen from political campaigns in the present time. But I am really just telling you a Charles Lindbergh rally. And if there are parallels there, I'm that's not intentional. It's not hardly my fault if history rhymes, right? Or even the fact that we're using America First again without seemingly understanding what it was in the 1940s, without even understanding that we actually used it in the 1940s. So, you know, so that one, Murder Among Friends, the same places has been challenged or banned, or I've been told not to talk about it. I get a list every once in a while. Please don't talk about these books. And it is not banned because it is the history of two teenagers who kill a 14-year-old for fun. You'd think that would be the part that would people would find most offensive, but it's because of the teenagers' their sexual relationship. So that seems to be a problem. And recently, I had a challenge come out of California for the Enigma girls, and yeah, I don't understand that at all. I
What what
just
was
I
what was
just
the
don't even
objections for that
I,
one?
I don't know what the objection was. I know I had honeybee, you know, was objected to too because it's about climate change, but it's really not. I mean, it is, but it's really not. Yeah, I
Uh,
can't worry about it, right?
so what is your message to our librarians watching that might be undergoing some of those community challenge over the content of some of these books?
Oh, I can't even tell them what to do, but I can certainly tell them that they are my heroes. We started with my hero, Miss Snyder. That you know, they're going to save the world. I'm serious. Librarians will save the world, and that they may not know that, but we are all standing tough behind them. And anything I can do, let me know. But I can't imagine. I can't believe that we're all sort of in this place, where, yeah.
It's
It
it
is, it is shocking, right? How did we get here? This wasn't supposed to be my job, right? I was supposed to just be able to tell the truth. And teens can certainly handle the truth. Matter of fact, they're unbelievably good at, I don't even have to answer the questions um, that those books, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't have to provide the answers to the questions that those books, raise. Um, all I have to do is raise the questions and give them the information. And kids, teenagers, they are so smart, they can wrestle with it, and they always come up with the right answer. I mean, I know we have to trust our readers and we have to trust our librarians, but
So we're running a little bit low on time because we're on the free version of Zoom. Um, but I was told that you have an extracurricular focus that we needed to make some time to talk for. So to lighten things up a little bit, tell us about your work with, I believe it was orphaned rhinoceroses.
I do. I have been working at the Zululand Rhino Orphanage. I am passionate about saving the rhino, and I have done all kinds of stuff. Like I've gone out to dehorn rhinos. I mean, we take adult rhinos and we take the horn off so the horn doesn't get poached. It grows back. But they're being poached for horns, basically to turn into, used to be medicinal purposes, but now it's for tchotchkes and like rings and bracelets, and that it's maddening to me. Because the rhino is an extraordinary creature, and I've discovered this at the Zululand Rhino Orphanage. They're like big dogs, right? So if you go out with your bottle and your bowl of rhino kibble, and if you're like me, I'll call, I last time I was there, I was calling out, come to me, my little sausages, and they come, they're like 4 feet high, and they dun, 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 with their adorable eyes, and they come running up, and they're so eager to eat, and so, yeah, you feed them a bottle, and then those that are weaning, they get basically what is rhino kibble. And if they're a white rhino, they don't have any teeth in the front. So I can take my hand, put some kibble on it, shove it into their mouth. They'll clamp down. I roll my stuff onto the back of their tongue, and they chew it up, and then we do it again and again and again. But I had not realized they have their own personalities, how intelligent they are. They have their own language. They do vocalize to each other, and everything means something. You can stop a rhino. Here's a hint for all your viewers. If you're ever have a rhino that's charging at you coming down the street, I wish, wouldn't that be exciting? But if it's coming down the street, you can actually stop the rhino simply by putting your hand underneath the back right leg and scratching the inside of the back leg. And not only will they stop, but they'll stick that back leg out like a ballet leg. And then if you keep scratching, they'll actually just roll over for you. So they're amazing. They're amazing. And, we're just poaching them out of extinction. So that is also what my new book is on.
I was just about to ask. This sounds like we might be in obsession
Right.
level leading to a book.
Yeah, and it's such a gray area, right? Because the poachers that I actually did speak to, because I've been to South Africa a couple of times now, and I've taken a wildlife forensics class, so I know what to do if you find a rhino, um, dead rhino. Um, but it's a black and white issue because the gentlemen that are poaching rhinos are very poor South Africans. Some of them said to me they'd never even seen a rhinoceros until they actually went out to poach them because we still have the legacy of apartheid in South Africa. So poor South Africans, black South Africans, have not historically been able to go into their parks and conservancies. It costs money, right? So they always feel as if those parks are for other people, tourists, white people, people with money. And so they don't have the attachment to the rhino. And yet they're living in villages with no running water, no electricity, no medical care, no school for their kids. Um, what would you do? Right? And somebody's going to offer you thousands of dollars to go and kill a rhino for its horn. Um, what would you do? Right? So that idea that poacher is bad may have to be reconsidered.
So it sounds like just like with Jim Jones, you're finding humanity in a spot you didn't expect it.
Yeah, yeah. How dare America or how dare humans be so complex, so gray, not just black and white, right? So, yeah. So, as I've learned, poaching has to stop from the top. So it has to stop in China, it has to stop in Vietnam. Yeah.
All right. Well, I am getting the countdown to cut off. We're under a minute. I
Great.
cannot thank you enough for joining us.
Oh, this was so much fun, Justin. Thank you.
Absolutely. Where can our viewers find you? Maybe, book their own conversations with you and their kids. Just anything in general that you want to promote before we cut off here.
Oh, I'm at Candy Fleming Books on Instagram and at CandaceFleming.com is my website. You can write to me through there or on Instagram.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to us.
Great.
And
Thanks.
everybody look for Death in the Jungle in your library.
Thanks, Justin.
Thank you.